Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know we have people joining us from different platforms such as YouTube, Twitch, and Purple. I am super excited and super pumped to be talking to you folks today. What about you, Rashi?
Absolutely. I'm super excited about this session today, especially to be talking on such an important topic for our customers.
You said it, Rashi. Again, welcome, folks. Welcome to this Learn Live session. We're here today to talk about migration to Azure and specifically how you can accelerate your migrations to Azure. My name is Deepika Seelam and I'm a senior product manager on the Azure Migrate team. I've been on the cloud assessment and migration space for a few years now, and I love building capabilities that can make migrations to Azure more seamless and more secure while enabling better management of your workloads once they're migrated to Azure. Well, that's about me. Rashid, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Definitely. Hi, everyone. I'm Rashi Joshi, and I'm also a program manager with the Azure Migrate team. Like Deepika, I've also been doing cloud migrations for quite some time now. I started as a developer, did some consulting work, and now here I am as a product manager. I'm super passionate about demystifying cloud and its value to people and businesses. Joining us today Joining us today is another subject matter expert. His name is Vikram Bansal. Say hi to him in the chat window wherever you've joined this session from. He'll be moderating the chat today and will answer a lot of your questions as we go along. So, we have a packed agenda for this session, so you hold tight. We'll be using the Learn module to follow along. We'll cover topics such as benefits and drivers for migrating to Azure. How should you think through your cloud migration journey? We'll also kind of give you a flavor of the most common migration projects that we've seen our customers execute. We'll also spend some time on tools and programs that Azure has to offer to aid your journey. And that's not it. We'll also have a surprise planned for all of you. We wanted to give you a real sense of how migrations look like. So we'll give you a walkthrough, a detailed walkthrough of one of the migration tooling available with Azure. So Deepika, let's give everyone a glimpse of what will their takeaways be from this session.
Yes. To summarize, at this end of the session, you'll be able to reflect on the benefits and triggers of moving to Azure. You'll understand how do you go discover your existing IT estate at scale? How do you right size your workloads and understand the readiness for cloud? How do you understand those application dependencies and use them to design high confidence migration waves? And of course, how do you migrate at scale in compliance with your organizational requirements? So for today's session, we're going to make use of two Learn Live modules. Our moderators will put the links in the chat as well, so you can use it as a reference as we go along the topics on the list today. Again, quick reminder on the Learn Live modules. They are free to use self-learning exercises that allow you to deep dive and explore a topic with the step-by-step guidance that's available. Again, you can use this learning modules and exercises to build new skills or just ramp up on Azure and Microsoft products. With that, Rashi, let's get started with today's session.
Let's
Again,
do this.
folks, urge you to keep the session interactive. Keep your comments flowing in. We have Vikram from the Azure Migrate product team who's going to monitor the chat window. So feel free to use the chat for any questions or comments you'd like to add. And for folks joining us on other platforms, feel free to add your answers in the comment section.
Yeah, and just not questions. You can just pop in there and just say hi to Vikram. Tell us what brings you here, just your top of the mind as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So let's start today's session by outlining some of our objectives today. Here are some objectives we'll definitely look to achieve today, but we want to hear more from you on what you would like to get out of this session. So feel free to let us know in the chat box or in the comment section and share with the moderators on what brings you to the session today. Now let's move on. So when you think about moving to Azure, it's very important to understand the fundamental drivers to adopt cloud. Again, when you think about cloud, it's very important that our customers typically understand the benefits and the reasons that they're actually adopting cloud for. So why
Yeah,
don't we go?
Yeah, sorry to cut you there, Deepika. Very well said. We have seen customers in the past who are interested in moving to cloud, but they say the benefits aren't totally clear.
That's so true, Rashi. So you know what? Let's just go ahead and set some context on this, on what are some of the top drivers of moving to cloud. Starting with optimizing costs. Of course, the ability to optimize costs by flipping capex to opex and just being able to pay for what you consume instead of spending all that big money on maintaining data centers. Second
Yep.
most important factor, security. Microsoft has over $1 trillion in security investments.
One
And
trillion dollars, that's impressive.
yes, Rashi, $1 trillion and over 3,500 cybersecurity professionals who are
Right.
working on making the cloud more secure for your organization. Third important factor, scalability. Cloud capacity is scalable effortlessly. And of course, focus on innovation. You can remove those operational burdens of managing data centers and free up your IT resources to focus on innovating, both for your customers and your customers. Well, these benefits are well understood, and we're seeing migration modernization projects starting to accelerate. Many of these reasons are infrastructure driven, but with the recent change in times and, of course, the increasing maturity of customer use cases, we're seeing many other motivators emerge. Rashi, why don't you walk us through some of the top trends we've been seeing of late?
Yes, Deepika, let's do that. So, first of all, starting with the most common one, maintaining data centers on premises can be a huge financial burden. As our customers start to support remote work in the last few years, we've seen that happen. They are viewing data center expiry is some kind of an opportunity, more of like an inflection point to move from a capex kind of a model to an opex model with cloud migrations. And while we're talking about cost, Deepika, a lot of businesses that we are talking to are facing cash flow challenges. They want to free up the cash and want to invest in other parts of businesses where that cash would mean more and bring more value. And of course, we talked about cybersecurity and security just before this slide. So, cybersecurity threats are best mitigated when you when you have your workloads operating in a secure cloud like Azure, which gives you the most advanced set of governance and compliance capability out of any cloud provider. Right,
Very
Deepika?
true, Rashi. And let's not forget about how the times have changed during the pandemic.
Of
While there
course.
is a slowdown in some sectors, a lot of other businesses are just accelerating. They're finding that their existing systems and solutions are just not able to keep up.
Yep.
Meeting demands for rapidly scaling infrastructure and ensuring business continuity is best met on a platform like Azure. But all these benefits we just spoke about are all business related drivers. Rashi, what other benefits can I expect for my developer community or application teams?
Great question, Deepika. So moving to cloud can help businesses shift their focus on application innovation. We can't stress enough on that. With Azure, you can significantly reduce or eliminate operational responsibilities and refocus your efforts on, say, innovation. So you can let Microsoft take care of your OS upgrades, patching, security, and what you can do is focus your time and energy on innovation itself. So you can go to market faster, gain that competitive edge over your competitors out there. And who doesn't want that, right, Deepika?
Absolutely.
Cool. So we've been talking. It's been a couple of minutes. We've spent some time on why Azure and why migrations, right? I think it's a great point where we pause and reflect on what we've learned so far. And what's better than a pop quiz, right?
Pop quiz, Rashi. Are we giving out any gifts to the audience then for correct answers?
I knew you'd ask that. And yes, we'll be giving the gift of knowledge. So, I know I'm not on point with my jokes today, but let's maybe, okay, I'm sorry for that. Let's maybe get started with the first question. Your moderators will now put the first question in the chat for folks who can answer using the poll that's been posted. Use that. Otherwise, feel free to put the right answers in the chat. We'll move on with the first question. and which is essentially which of the following best describe the benefits of moving to Azure. And you'll start seeing this question coming on your chat. By that time, Deepika, we hear this from customers quite a lot, right? Should they be looking at cloud just for cost? What do you think?
Rashi, I was just looking through the question, and if I had to guess, I would say all of the above. But there's clearly one option that's standing out, which is just not about cost. I know we covered some of the key important factors. We spoke about the $1 trillion investments in security. So there's one answer which is like a very all-encompassing answer that has all of it. But I think this is a very easy one, Rashi, I think for our audience.
I think so, and I kind of gave them an answer already. But yes, the answer is B. Maybe we can just check how our audience is doing, how have they been responding to this. But by the time, let me just summarize. Yes, the option is B. The benefits of Azure are listed in this option. Cloud delivers these fundamental technology benefits, and it can help your companies as well. Do we have a poll on how our audience is doing on these questions before we move on to the next one?
Yes, Rashi, I see the answers coming in, and I'll tell you, audience is, I think we have a fab audience today, Rashi. I think almost all of them have got it right. So I think
Okay.
we've clearly communicated what we had to hear.
That's job well done. I think let's move on to the next question to really see if everyone's been listening. So let's move on to the second question. And this one is, which one of these best describes the most common migration and modernization triggers? And now a lot of them are infra driven triggers. What do you think, Deepika? What could the answer be here?
Yeah, so when you think about the common modernization and migration triggers, you want to think infrastructure driven, but also
Mm-hmm.
you want to think of other value that you can give to your business. And there's one
Mm-hmm.
answer there which covers both of this adequately. And
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's I think, did I just give away the answer? Yes,
You
but there
did.
is one
You did.
option which does that. But I'm seeing the audience also picking the right answer. So that's, again, I think this is a very straightforward walk for them, Rashi.
I think so too. Amazing. So, yes, the answer is C. I think a lot of us in the audience have gotten it right. Migration triggers are typically IT oriented or based on timelines. A lot of firms, the migration by cloud is driven by need to quickly move, just get away from your on-prem costs, stay secure, and just simplify your operations. Of course, we've talked about this quite a lot, and great that our audience has picked it up as well. So let's go to the third question. The moderator will put the third question in the chat as well. Let's quickly move on. This one I really like, and I'm really curious to see what our audience thinks of it. So, when you consider if you should migrate or modernize your applications, which is the first question you should ask in this evaluation? Oh my God, this is a question we get from customers so many times. They come to us saying, "I know where I want to be, just help me get there." And what do you think, Deepika? Is that the right approach? Do we want to tell our audience? Give a little bit of
Yeah.
hint.
Yes, yes. I'll try not to give away the answer this time. So
Yes.
we're hearing this very often, which is, of
Mhm.
course, some of the technologies have caught on, be it containerization or serverless, and we're seeing folks coming and saying, you know what, I want to be on containers. But our recommendation to them is just think about it, take a step back, and think about how you want to go forth with your application, what you think is the future for your application. So you should just think about it, take a step back, work with your application teams to see how they're thinking about the future of the application. Is it something you want to retain, or is it something that you want to decommission soon, or is it something that you want to actively invest it in, bring to cloud, and modernize it with the latest capabilities that cloud has on offer? So Rashi, I think I'm looking at the poll results as well. Of course, I think the audience is just fabulous. Like I said, all of them have got it right. So yes, I think this is the way to sort of think about how you go about your application migration journey.
Perfect, perfect. I feel so confident. I'm already energized for the rest of the session. I think our audience super engaged. We need to keep this engagement going on, and I think great point to maybe move ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's shift gears, folks, and look at how a typical migration and modernization journey looks like. Again, cloud migration involves organizational change management that spans people, process, and technology. So, today, let's just look at how a typical migration and modernization journey looks like. Again, we can break that down into three phases. We can break it
Right.
down into the planning phase, the implementation phase, and the operations phase.
Right. And Deepika, I want to make one point here before we move on. I want to tell our audience that the approach that they take could differ a lot from companies to companies, the goals that they have for their businesses, and it could be very specific to their organization needs. But it might be something similar, but the time and energy you spent in each phases could differ from companies to companies, right?
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that, Rashi. Just so my guidance here is to think of this as a framework, and of course, the approach will be specific to your organization's needs. So, Rashi, let's go forward and deep dive into each of these phases and see what really entails. So, starting with the planning phase, it's that critical time that will determine how your migration journey will unfold. It's the right time to define your migration strategy and have your stakeholders aligned on the vision and roadmap. Gathering the stakeholder alignment will facilitate a smoother migration for you that one meets your organizational goals and as well as the buy in of all the stakeholders that are involved in the process. Rashi and I cannot emphasize this enough, but it is super important to work with your stakeholders to build business cases so that you reach a common understanding of the business value you can expect and the ROI you can achieve. So, our guidance here is to start planning by deep diving into your application and infrastructure estate. Take inventory and assess your workloads for their readiness. This assessment will help guide your approach in the execution phase. And of course, you have tooling to help you out here. You can leverage tools like Azure Migrate, which can perform at scale discovery and assessments very quickly for you.
Yeah, and Deepika, this is very important. We've seen a lot of customers getting overwhelmed in the planning phase itself, and I want to make a very clear statement out there to all our audience. You don't have to do it alone. We've seen customers taking help of partners. They've been leveraging and engaging with these partners to get help and just utilize their deep domain expertise to even in the planning as well as the next stage, the execution stage that we're going to talk about.
Absolutely, Rashi. And while talking about the execution phase, ensure that you're factoring in Azure fundamentals and workload level considerations to determine the target migration or modernization approach. You should follow an iterative, workload based, wave oriented approach to migration. This approach will enable your teams to execute with quality and will also allow for any incremental improvements along the way.
Yeah, and I'm super glad you mentioned building up on cloud skills, right? You mentioned that there is investment needed by companies and organizations to augment their skills and develop and make sure that that IT and app development teams are up to date with Azure, with cloud fundamentals. That really helps go through this phase super smoothly.
Let's look at the final phase here now, the operations phase. Governance and management are key factors in this phase, and Azure offers a whole suite of solutions to help you here, be it enabling compliance with Azure policy, security and governance with Azure Security Center, seamless management with Azure automation, or ensuring business resiliency with backup and monitoring. We've got you covered here.
Yes.
Now that we have an understanding of the phases of cloud migration and modernization, Rashi, why don't we do a walkthrough of some of the common migration projects we've been seeing of late?
Yeah, of course. So let's look at this. The most common scenarios we've seen customers execute is migrating their Windows and Linux servers to Azure. The next are database migrations, and the database migrations are not pivoted to just save cost, but also enhance performance and achieve scalability and flexibility objectives in cloud. Thirdly, the third most common we've seen, especially with COVID, Deepika, we've seen dealing with the realities of work from home. We've seen customers have been migrating their on-premises VDI to Azure, right?
Yeah. So, you know what, folks, let's put things into perspective and let's actually deep dive and give you a few examples of how you can think about your migration projects. So, let's start with Azure IaaS as a target. We're seeing very high volumes of workloads such as Windows Server, Linux, SQL Server as customers continue to migrate their data center to Azure. You can use the migration tooling and take any application that's running on premises and migrate the web, app, and data tiers of that application to Azure IaaS. While migrating to an Azure IaaS target may not be modernizing the application itself, but you can leverage the other modern services and cloud native capabilities to provide a modernized tool set for managing these IaaS deployments.
Right. And
Moving on,
yeah.
let's look at another IaaS offering, which is Azure VMware Solution offering. Again, if you're a VMware shop, you can seamlessly migrate to our dedicated Azure VMware Solution offering. So this way you can continue to manage your environments with the same VMware tools you already have a know of how while you modernize your infrastructure and management with Azure services. Rashi, I know we spoke about Azure IaaS targets. Can you go forward and let's talk about SQL then?
Yeah, definitely. As you said, we talked about infrastructure as a service, how that looks on Azure. Let's look at PaaS now, or platform as a service, as you say. So with Azure SQL, you can rehost SQL workloads on SQL Server on Azure virtual machines. You can modernize existing applications with Azure Managed Instance, and also support modern cloud applications with Azure SQL Database and also Azure SQL Edge. And while we're at it, let's also talk about applications. We've talked about infra, talked about data. Let's talk about applications a little bit. Custom applications are common workloads that we see customers migrating to Azure, right, Deepika? So if you like to maintain control of your infrastructure, you can choose to migrate your VMs running your web applications to, say, an Azure VM itself. If you like the portability benefit provided by containers, you can choose to go to Azure Kubernetes services. And you can also choose to migrate and deploy application on PaaS services like Azure App Service. And moving on, we'll also give you a glimpse of how can you execute such projects with some of the migration tooling.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Now let's look at one of the other examples Rashi spoke about, the increasing need that organizations have to support report work models. And of course, we're seeing that in action. Customer demand for VDI migration is also on a all-time high, and as organizations are striving to keep their employees productive for remote work engagements. So you can migrate your on-premises virtual desktops to Windows virtual desktops on Azure, while you migrate your on-premises media infrastructure to Azure IaaS. And this is a very common trend that we've been seeing in recent times.
Yep, yep. And we've talked about this. We talked about the different common projects we've seen customers execute, but how to actually implement them. This was good for theory, but how do you do it? So we want to talk about it a little bit. Deepika and I've often seen customers, as I said, getting overwhelmed with these migration projects. There are times you might not want to have a partner working with you as well. So, to support you and your customers, we have tools and services that support Azure migration and modernization projects. And yeah, Deepika, do you think we should go in detail of each of these?
Yeah, absolutely, Rashi. Let's do that.
Let's do a deep dive. So let's talk about the first one, cloud adoption framework for Azure. So if you're new to Azure, go check out this link in this slide. You'll be going through a Microsoft certified guidance of how to execute migrations, plan and execute migrations in general. This provides best practices, documentation, and tools that is designed to help you create and implement business and technology strategies for the cloud. So Deepika talked about creating a cloud business case or a business cloud justification. This is the one place you should refer to get your numbers and your theory right. And we've seen cloud architects, IT professionals, and even business decision makers achieve their cloud adoption goals across the different phases we talked about using the cloud adoption framework. And next up on the line is Azure Migrate. I know Deepika is waiting very patiently to talk you all through the tool itself. But before that, I just want to take a minute. Just want to remind everyone that they can put any questions that they have or any thoughts they've had around migrations or anything related to Azure in the chat window. We'll be happy to take them up now or even before moving on. So yeah, take it away, Deepika.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Azure Migrate is Definitely an interesting topic to cover. So, regardless of the migration or modernization scenarios you're looking to execute, Azure Migrate is your go to choice. To just summarize it in one line, Azure Migrate is a central hub of tools for all your data center migration and modernization needs, be it infrastructure, applications, or data. Azure Migrate supports key migration scenarios, including migrating Windows, Linux, SQL Server, other databases, data with data box, web applications, and virtual desktops. You can also use the tool to containerize and modernize your .NET and Java applications onto Azure App Services or Azure Kubernetes Services. What's more is Azure Migrate also enables you to plan and track your migration flow all the way from discovery assessments to migration. Rashi, I know Azure Migrate is a very powerful tool. Why don't we spend a few minutes in demonstrating these powerful capabilities to our audience as well?
Yes, definitely. I know. In our audience, a lot of people are curious about Azure Migrate, and this is the section we all want you to focus. We're going to talk about the theory and also give you a quick demo of the tool itself. So hang tight. Let's move on. Think yes. Let's talk about the first tool, which is the first party discovery and assessment tool that Azure Migrate has. There are a couple of capabilities that we're going to talk about and also demo it to you in just a bit. So, the first party discovery and assessment tool allows you to perform an agentless, comprehensive, at scale discovery of machines running on any platform, be it hypervisor platforms such as VMware or Hyper-V, Microsoft Hyper-V itself, or even public clouds such as AWS, GCP, or even bare metal servers. You can also leverage the CSV import option to bulk import your source machines and say perform just quick assessments, just plan your migrations. This tool also provides features that can help inventory applications and software components installed on your servers. The agentless dependency mapping helps you visualize dependencies across different tiers of applications and across applications and ensure that nothing is left behind when you're planning to migrate.
Absolutely, folks. This is a powerful capability that you can use to design high confidence migration waves and mitigate any complexities with your migrations upfront.
Yes, yes, and with all that rich data that we're able to discover, you can also help all this data to optimize your cloud cost and analyze the actual resource utilization in terms of cores, memory, disk, IOPS, throughput, and just determine your quick wins. You can plan your migrations to Azure Virtual Machines, Azure VMware Solution, Azure SQL, and also Azure App Services using this tool. And uh, moreover, like when you're executing these planning cycles, you also need to perform a lot of what if scenarios, see which offers make sense, which location makes sense, and this tool lets you do that as well. And we'll show all of this to you in just a few minutes. But Deepika, before we move on, should we talk about migration tooling option that Azure Migrate has?
Absolutely, Rashi. Let's talk about the server migration tool. Again, the server migration tool is a powerful tool that can be leveraged to migrate source machines that are running on any platform to Azure. Again, the server migration tool provides an agentless option that can be used to migrate your VMware VMs and Hyper-V VMs to Azure, and an agent-based option for migrating bare metal servers or just VMs hosted on other public clouds, be it AWS, GCP, all that is possible. Again, with the agentless migration option, you can ensure zero data loss while migrating your VMware VMs. And of course, there's an option to also test your migration, and you can use that to validate your application performance and migrate with confidence to Azure.
Yep.
So, this option that we spoke about was all about rehost. Rashid, do you think we should go ahead and speak about the new capability in the Azure Migrates portfolio?
Yes, 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 definitely. We should tell customers how and our audience how can they modernize and migrate as well.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and talk about the app containerization tool. The Azure Migrate App Containerization tool provides an easy way for you to containerize existing applications with minimal to no code changes. Again, it helps you to discover the application components and packages them in a container image for you. These containerized images applications can then be deployed onto Azure Kubernetes Service or Azure App Service. Again, during the process of containerizing this application, the tool also offers other sort of benefits. It helps move the content that's stored on the application server's file system or just network file shares to persistent volumes outside the container image. Again, you can customize, download, and reuse all the tool generated artifacts, be it Docker files, container images for any day to operations. Well, that's a quick intro and overview to the Azure Migrate world and its powerful capabilities. Before we move forward, I just want to take a quick pause and just remind you folks, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to add that in the chat box or just add that in the comment box and our moderators will make sure they get answered.
Yeah, let's look if we have any questions before moving on to the demo. So are there any questions, Deepika, that we should be answering?
Yeah, I'm seeing Vikram's answering a lot of them, Rashi. So we can go ahead and finish the demo and come back and see if there are any questions that we'll have to pick up as well.
Perfect, perfect. Cool.
Yeah,
You want to take it
so
away?
of course, yes. I was so looking forward to this section.
Mhm.
Again, Rashi promised you a surprise at the start, and here is the surprise. What we're going to do is we're going to do a live demo of the Azure Migrate tooling. We thought, what's better than actually give you a sneak peek where you can see yourself how easy it is to discover and migrate with Azure Migrate. So in this demo, we'll take you through the entire spectrum of Azure Migrate, all the way from discovery, assessment to migration, and talk about how you can leverage this tool along different stages of your migration and modernization journey. So Rashi, let's get started. Firstly, to get started, you need an Azure subscription. Again, it can be a free one or a paid one. But using Azure Migrate is completely free, and they just may be some computer net storage charges that might apply when you finally migrate. But we'll talk more about that in a bit. So to get started, of course, you'll have to open up the Azure portal. You can see that on the screen. And to get started with Azure Migrate, all you have to do is go search for Azure Migrate in the search bar above. So let me do that. This is the landing page for Azure Migrate, where you can see there are different scenarios that you can start your migration journey on. So for this demo, we'll be talking through the rehost scenario. So in the migration goals, I'm going to select servers, databases, and web applications and click Discover, Assess, and Migrate to get started. As soon as you click that, you'll be prompted to create an Azure Migrate project. If you already have any projects running in your subscription, it'll just default to the last project that you were working on. For today's demo, we'll create a new Azure Migrate project. So to do that, I'll go click on Change and select Click here, create a new project. Again, it's very easy to get started. Very few inputs to create the Azure Migrate project. So we'll select the subscription, the resource group, and I'll give the Migrate project a name. I'm going to call it Contest or Demo. And of course, you can also select the geography in which you want to create this project. Now, you should
Yes.
be thinking of the project as a logical container of all the metadata that gets collected from your on-premises environment.
Yeah, and folks with data residency considerations, we've got you covered with this comprehensive geo coverage that you can see on the screen right now.
Yeah. So let's select United States. And as you can see, there are some additional capabilities and settings available for you as well. If you're an organization with strict requirements to not traverse public networks, you can use the private endpoint connectivity method to discover, assess, and migrate over a private network by leveraging Azure Private Link. For today's demo, we'll stick with the default scenario, which is public connectivity. So I'll just quickly review all the settings. Everything looks good. So I'm going to just click on Create to create the Azure Migrate project. So what this does is it goes ahead and creates the Azure Migrate project in the chosen subscription and resource group. And it'll also go create some resources that are required for the functioning of Azure Migrate and also pre-configure the Azure Migrate tools that are required for the discovery, assessment, and migration process. As you can see, we've pre-configured the discovery and assessment tool and the server migration tool. Quick reminder, the discovery and assessment tool allows you to perform discovery at scale, be it Windows, Linux, SQL, web apps will cover that. Again, it can analyze dependencies and you can perform very quick assessments with it. The server migration tool again can be used to migrate from any platform to Azure. You also have the option to go add other third party tools or independent software vendor tools for any other assessment and migration scenarios. Well, that's how you create an Azure Migrate project. One thing I wanted to add here was is this Azure Migrate project can support up to 35,000 server discoveries and assessments in just one project. Again, this tool was built keeping the requirements of at-scale discovery and migrations in mind. That's it. That's how you create an Azure Migrate project. Now let's look at how do you go about the discovery and assessment process. Rashid, do you want to help us with that?
Yeah, and thank you so much, Deepika, for getting us started. Let's move on. Let's see how what you do once you've created the project, when once you are in Azure Migrate. So at this point, the first thing you do after you've created the project is go ahead and start discovering. I'll click on discover on this tool over here. I see two options. I can either use an appliance to do the discovery, or I can import this using a CSV file. If you use a CSV file, you need to download a prescribed template, feed in your server inventory data, and just bring all that into Azure Migrate and go ahead. For this demo, we'll discover using the appliance. You can mention if your servers are virtualized via VMware, Hyper-V, or they're just physical servers or servers from other cloud. For this, I'll choose the VMware vSphere. The first step that you do is generate a project key. Now, this project key helps connect the appliance, we'll shortly talk about it, to your Azure Migrate project. So I'll give this appliance a name and click on generate key.
And what this does is it goes and creates some resources in the background and associates these resources with the Azure Migrate project. Again, these resources are required for the functioning of the Azure Migrate project.
Exactly. And while that's happening, we'll move on to the next step, which is downloading the Azure Migrate appliance. An appliance is nothing but think of it as a virtual machine or a server sitting in your environment and collecting all that good, rich data and sending to Azure Migrate. Now, there are two ways of doing it. You can either download an OVA file, and which has everything pre-configured, and use it in your in your environment, or download it as a zip file and use something like PowerShell to get it started. So the purpose of this demo, we're just moving ahead, and I've done this process already. I've downloaded the appliance and have set it up, and we'll go through it just in another minute. You can see there are some prerequisites that are needed when you are setting up the appliance. Make sure you have that done, and let's move on and look at what that appliance looks like. So what I've done is, in my on-prem environment, I have already downloaded and set the appliance up. This is what I've done right now is I've just did a remote desktop connection into the server where my appliance was hosted. And what you see here is a web applications, which is my appliance configuration manager. And here is where I do just a few more steps and get started. So as you can see, the first step here is set up prereqs. A lot of these are automatic prerequisite checks that the appliance is running for you, just making sure the connectivity with Azure is there. You can see there are certain steps that we'll do. I'll cover each of them, and then you just start discovery. So first of all, Azure appliance checks. If you have all these prereqs check, you can rerun these prerequisites at any time, and just make sure everything is good to move ahead. The second step essentially is to register with Azure Migrate. And here is where the key that Deepika was talking about comes into play. I've already done this, but what you do is you paste that key here and just log in with your with the credential that with the user that has credentials to even do that discovery. So you can see the appliance is already registered. The third step is giving credentials. Essentially, the step one within the third step is providing the vCenter creds. You can give a friendly name to your source type. For me, it is a vCenter server. I've already given the username. The second step is providing details about this vCenter server. So I can give IP address or FQDN. To get my assessment for a lift and shift assessment, discovery assessment started, that's it. That's all I need to do. I can just provide this, I can do this step to move down and just click on start discovery. It will start sending my configuration and performance data of the servers in this vCenter to Azure Migrate. But in case you want to do more, you want to understand what's actually running on these servers, you'll also have to give a little more credentials at step three. If you want to do dependency analysis, software inventory, look at what is running in your SQL servers and your IaaS web servers, you'll give a few more credentials, give those authentication that the appliance needs to get that information, and you can give multiple credentials at this point, revalidate them, and just start discovery. That's it. That's how simple it is to start the discovery. Once I click on start discovery, it'll take a couple of minutes before the data starts showing up in portal. For the purpose of this demo, we've kind of expedited it, say 10 minutes into, and you can see some of the data has started showing up on the portal. So let's look at what this discovery data essentially has. So if you look at it, I can already can see, Deepika, we've done 67 servers. We've discovered some of them are running SQL, some of them are running IaaS web servers, essentially web apps. I can click on those number of servers and just look at what my IT estate looks like. And this has a list of all the servers that we had in this vCenter. I can see the IP address, what applications are running on these servers. I can see what workloads are running on them, just other configuration related data as well. Let's look into what more can you get out of it. So if I click on the number of applications, I can essentially see what are the applications, roles, and features running on these servers. This is when I provided the extra credentials in step three to get this data out. We've seen customers export this software inventory and also run different kind of analysis, figuring out which applications are the most common applications running on this service, right, Deepika? So moving on, let's also show another powerful capability of our tool, which is the dependency analysis, right? You talked about it, leaving no server behind. You can click on view dependencies on this server. What you see here is dependency data of between servers by default for a day. I can actually click on that and customize it for different number of days, last 24 hours, 1 week. Essentially, you're trying to figure out which servers have been talking to each other. This is something which is a very crucial step in understanding which application, what are these application groups that need to be migrated together. And as you can see here, you can see the different connections between different VMs, which processes are running. You can visualize this across multiple number of servers as well. And that's not it. You can also export this entire dependency map using the dependency analysis export feature. And you can either analyze this in an Excel, or you can also use a Power BI utility that we have and kind of envision all of this in at one place. Moving on, let's also look at different workloads that are running. So let's look at which servers are actually running SQL instances. As you can see here, this one is running multiple SQL instances. I can figure out which SQL edition or versions these instances are running on. Can find other details. I can see what databases are running on these instances. You can see different size, compatibility levels, all of that detail coming in through that discovery using the appliance. Let's also look at which servers are running web apps here. And I can see there are different number of web apps running on these servers. If I click on them, I'll get a little more detail on what ports are they running, what are the other details around these web apps. I can see all of it here. So let's maybe go back and look at what you do with this data. So what we've seen till now is we've seen how you can do discovery using the appliance, all the good configuration and performance data that this appliance can collect. I think it's super important at this point to see what do you do with this data. Yes, the discovery can be done. You can do make your migration waves, figure out what appliances, what servers need to migrate together, but what next, right, Deepak? I'm sure all our audience is wondering what to do now. So let's move on and see what you do next. Essentially, you'd create something what we called as assessments, which is how you plan migrations. So I'll click on assess and choose which target am I planning this migration for. I'll just click on Azure VM to get started. I can see there are different assessment types that I can create this assessment for. There are three different steps in this wizard that I'll go through one by one. I can choose the discovery source as appliance or imported via CSV. For this demo, I'll just use the appliance. I can edit the properties or settings on which this assessment was created. So if I click on edit over here, there are different settings on which you can see how your recommendations for migration changes. You can change the target properties, what sizing considerations and what pricing considerations go in this planning. You can choose what locations within the geography can you migrate these to. What happens if you choose different offers? What if you bring your Windows licenses, SQL licenses? How does that look like? I'll click on next, and this is a super important step. This is where you select the servers you want to assess. I'll give this assessment a name. I'll create something called a group. Now, a group is a logical, think of it as a logical container or a logical grouping of all the servers that you're planning to migrate together. Um, I'll select the servers I want to put in this group. Let me quickly do that. I can choose multiple appliances and group them together as well. And you can actually essentially put around 35,000 servers in one group. At this point, you can review if everything looks good and just click on create assessment. Idly, it takes just a few minutes. This assessment gets created. Let me go and show you how that assessment looks like. Now, I clicked on the VM assessment that I just created. You can see the Azure readiness. You can see a couple of them are ready, a couple of them say ready with conditions. Some you can see what the cost split looks like for migrating them to Azure virtual machines. I can go to the readiness report and see on a server level what are the recommendations that Microsoft's asking me to take my VMs to. You can see what VM sizes, what is the suggested migration tool, and we'll talk about how you actually migrate as well in just a few minutes. You can see if you click on a particular server, you can also see what actually goes in this recommendation. So looking at how much were my cores, what was my CPU utilization, what was my memory, what was my memory utilization, all that goodness that went into this recommendation. Then we can also look at what storage considerations were taken while making this recommendation, and then essentially how does my cost look like. I'll also take you to the cost report now, looking at on a server level, how does your cost vary and what does your monthly cost look like. All of this is you can review them on the portal, but you can also plan to export it um, in an Excel. So I can
Yeah,
click on
and you can also edit properties as well at any time and create
right.
your versions of what if scenarios for different types of assessment. You can change the region, you can see how the cost varies if you increase the comfort factor on some of the VM scaling and scaling down.
Perfect. That's a great point, Deepika. Yes, this is where you go and create your what if scenarios, create multiple assessments, see what works best for you. While we are talking about IaaS, this is one of the first migration projects that we saw customers execute, migrating your Windows Linux servers to Azure virtual machines. Let's look at another IaaS offering, which is the Azure VMware solution. And this is particularly for migrating. If you're a VMware shop, this is a very, very, very important target you should be listening about. So, with the target as Azure VMware solution, this is what the assessment report looks like. You can see that for migrating these 67 virtual machines, I can see what is my readiness for Azure Virtual Machine, Azure VMware Solution or AVS. What are the feature compatibilities that I can resolve to get them ready? I can see that there are 4 nodes that are being recommended to migrate these virtual machines. If I migrate all these virtual machines, how much resources am I taking up on AVS, and what's the scope of expanding more at times? Here again, we have the readiness report. We talked about server on each of the server levels. What is the suggested migration tooling? Here it is the VMware HCX tool that's recommended. I can click on, I can go back to the overview. Here again, you can export this assessment. As Deepika I just mentioned, creating your what if scenarios with this assessment is also very similar. You can choose different target locations, different raid levels, see how can you make your servers and applications improve their performance on AWS. Now, you can also see what sizing considerations went into making these recommendations. And again, you can export them as an XLS file with all this goodness and details coming on in.
So, folks, these were two options that we had that we're currently for migrating to Azure IS targets. But now let's move on and look at how do you go do those assessments for past targets. Rashi, are you going to walk us through how do you perform SQL assessments?
Yeah, definitely. A very important part of an application is the databases as well. And we have a way of planning that migration as well. We'll quickly look at an Azure SQL assessment. I'll choose one, and I'll also take our audience through multiple scenarios that they can implement with this. So as you can see in this assessment, there are a couple of servers that we've assessed. Those are running some 133 SQL instances, couple of DBs running on those instances. You can see what's the readiness by recommended deployment type. Here again, we recommend you what we think is the best for your workloads, especially looking at feature compatibility and cost. But you can also choose to say, no, I just want to migrate everything to MI, just give me that recommendation. So you can do that as well. And you can see how your compute and storage cost for migrating them to Azure SQL PaaS looks like. Now, going to the readiness report, and here is where it's going to be super interesting. You can see the SQL instances running on this server. What is the readiness for migrating them to Azure SQL DB, Azure SQL database? What's the recommended configuration and the recommended tool? You can see there are different, for this particular instance, you can see this is ready. This is not ready for either of the past targets. And what we recommend is just migrate them as an Azure VM. You can see while migrating to Azure DB, there are a couple of issues. You can see the service broker feature, for example, is not supported on Azure SQL database. For Azure SQL MI, you can see there is another issue which says MI doesn't support multiple log files, and you have remediation guidance if you wish to make these ready for migrating to Azure SQL PaaS. Now, let's look at another scenario. Let's pick a particular instance and look at what happens if you are not ready for Azure SQL DB, but you're ready for another target. You're essentially recommended the one that you're ready for. Let's look at this one. This is interesting. For this, it's ready. It's not ready for Azure SQL MI, but ready for Azure SQL DB. You can look at what is the recommended configuration when you migrate to Azure SQL database. What does the cost look like for migrating each of these databases? Again, let me take you to another instance. You all must be wondering, okay, what about it's ready for both past targets, right? How do I make a call then? How do I decide? Does Microsoft have any recommendation here? So this is where we're going to take you next. Let's look at this one where it's ready for both past targets, but we've recommended Azure SQL MI. You look at recommendation details, it clearly tells you Azure SQL MI was a more cost-effective choice than Azure SQL DB. And here again, you can see all that performance data or resource utilization data that went into making these recommendations. And we all know migrating databases and hosting them could be super costly. Using this performance data can actually help you right size and see the most cost effective recommendations over here. So similar, you can look at cost reports over here. You can again edit, and as Deepika was saying, you can create your what if scenarios. You have your different target locations in Azure, different targets that you are planning to go to, and what are the different tiers, what is the service availability that you want for your databases. Again, you can export this assessment. Quickly, let me take you to another past target, which is Azure App Services. So for migrating your .NET Web Apps to Azure App Services, this is the assessment that you'd create. You can see how does the readiness look like, what does the monthly cost look like. You can see Azure App Services is costed on plans and not on a server level. And it's super difficult to do this by yourself, figuring it out in Excel spreadsheets. This tool lets you help plan that migration better. I can I'll take you to the readiness report and show you what it has. Again, this is divided on a per application level. What is the Azure App Service readiness? If you want to still migrate this as Azure App Service, what can you fix to migrate these? What are the different issues that you can fix and make it ready? If you don't decide to if you don't want to fix these and you really want to migrate faster, you can just lift and shift this particular server and take it to Azure virtual machine. Similarly, if you're ready, there's an app service plan that we're recommending you to migrate with. What does the cost look like? All of those details is something you can get here, and the suggested tool is the web app migration tool. Sorry. Moving on, you can see the monthly cost at this point. Export this assessment in an Excel file. As again, you can go to edit properties, customize this assessment. There's a lot of ways you can utilize these assessments, determine your quick wins, and plan your migrations. So this was all about migration planning. Deepika, why don't we move on and show our audience how can they actually reuse these assessments and finally migrate?
Yeah, absolutely, Rashi. I just want to quickly take a second to see if there are any questions that we have from the different platforms folks are joining us on. Rashi, there is one question if you're able to take it. How long should I run my assessment for? Should I run it for a day, or what is the recommended timeline for running an assessment?
So, hi, I just went away for a second, Deepika. Yes, I heard the question. So, we hear this question a lot. The ideal time is you need at least a month worth of data to be able to have a very strong recommendation. But we've seen even a 1 week worth of data is good enough. But if you really want to expedite all this, you can even run this for a day and look at your assessment recommendations.
Yes, and I think other thing is you can run it at different duration to see how your utilization data is getting captured, to see how the data changes and make a very accurate representation of at what point makes the most sense for you to go about. So you
Right.
have that flexibility with you as well.
Awesome. Yes, definitely.
Cool. Now let's go talk about, okay, we're done with discovery, we've done the assessments, but let's put things into action and see how you can actually migrate these servers to Azure. Rashi, let's get started with the demo for the migration tooling. Again, the server migration tool. We'll use the server migration tool today. It can be used to migrate hundreds of servers to Azure. The tool offers automation options, private link support, and supports up to 500 parallel migration. You also have customizations for better management and governance of your migrated workloads, be through resource tagging or even the option to customize your resource names of the resources in Azure. So let's get started with today's demo. Again, before you perform a migration, you need to copy the data to Azure. So let's start with that process by clicking replicate. Here you can choose the virtualization type for your servers. As you can see, you can migrate VMs from VMware vCenter, Hyper-V VMs, or just any server that's hosted anywhere. I'll select the appliance name and click on next. In this tab, I'll choose the servers that are part of my migration wave and that I want to actually migrate. Here comes the beauty of an integrated first party tool. You can actually import all the migration settings and your server list from the assessments that was just performed earlier and that was demonstrated by Rashi. This way, you import all the migration waves that are part of your assessments right into this journey, and you can import the settings and see the different servers that are part of that group. And I'll quickly select one server for today's demo and click on next, move forward. Here you can provide the target properties for your VM migration. Again, you can choose the target subscription, the resource group it should be a part of, the virtual network, the subnet, and of course, you also have additional options to choose the infrastructure redundancy option and also acknowledge if you want to bring the hybrid benefit option for it. Moving on, in this screen, you can customize the VM name. So here with folks with all the organizational requirements for following naming conventions, you have the flexibility to go customize the VM name. Again, beauty of a first party tool, the VM size is automatically populated based on the recommendations of assessments. But of course, you have the flexibility to go scale that up and scale that down as per your requirements.
Yeah, and Deepika, I want to emphasize this one thing to our audience right now. If you could see, this is what we've been talking all this while. You do not need to over provision on cloud. And even if you see over the screen here, you have a 4 core, 8000 MB RAM machine that was discovered on prem, which was your source VM, but is essentially is only the only VM size needed to migrate is like a 1 core 3.5 GB RAM machine. So you can at any time scale, and that's the flexibility of cloud. You don't need to pay for a 4 core machine anymore.
Absolutely, Rashi. That's savings right there for you folks. Now let's move on and look at what disk properties can you customize. Here, of course, again, you can select what disk you want to actually replicate. So if there are any disk you don't want to take along, again, you can make that selection and hold that back. You also have the option to go customize the disk type. Again, assessment will make that recommendation based on the IOPS and data churn, but you can also change it across to standard or premium based on what you think is the appropriate for your VM's performance. Moving on the tags page, of course, you can add tags like we spoke about for your migrated VMs, disk, and network cards.
Yeah, so essentially, Deepika, what you're saying is customers can add tags to their migrated VMs and be in compliance with their organizational requirements, right?
Absolutely, Rashi. Again, let's quickly review the settings and click replicate to start the replication. The replication will take a few minutes to progress based on the amount of data that has to be transferred, but we've got all the progress monitors for you so you can check that the replication is progressing, it's all healthy, and you also have status bars that tells you what state it is in. If you see it's an initial sync, which means the initial data is being copied over. You also have the option to go look at if you want to stop replication, if you don't want to migrate the server anymore, how do you get that off? So you can stop replication as well. Again, for today's demo, we have speed up the replication process. So if you see the status is now delta sync, which means the data copy is done and we're copying over any incremental bits. So you have minimal data loss. Again, we have cues for what should be your next call to action. If you see test migration pending, we recommend you to perform a test migration. Again, you can decide to either perform a test migration or a migration, but our recommendation is definitely for you to perform a test migration first so that you can migrate with confidence later. So to get started with the test migration process, I'll click test migrate. Again, here you can select the virtual network that the test migrated server should belong to. Ideally, you want to choose a virtual network that's isolated to perform your tests. You don't want the virtual network to connect back to your Active Directory or just connect back to your on prem world and cause any unintended impact. So we'll choose an isolated virtual network for the test migration and we'll trigger that operation. Again, the test migration will take a few minutes to complete. Again, you can use this to see if you're okay and validate all your application tests. So the test migration job has started. Now let's go ahead and see how that operation is progressing. So if you notice here, the test migration is still in progress, but once that's done, you can go ahead, perform your application tests, do all the checks that you have to do, and click on migrate to migrate the server finally to Azure. So we went through this process for one server as an example, but imagine doing this at scale for the entire list of servers that you want to migrate.
Yeah, so that's it. That's it, Deepika. That's how
That's,
simple it
yes,
is to migrate.
yes, that's it. That's how simple it is to migrate, Rashi.
That's awesome. So let's maybe just quickly recap and then we'll take a couple of questions that we see on the chat. So, what did we see today in the demo itself? We saw how to get started with Azure Migrate. We saw how to understand your digital estate and perform super critical analysis like a dependency analysis. We saw how that rich data that we captured can be used to create assessments and figure out how can you be super cost effective while migrating to cloud. We saw how to optimize cost, as I said. Finally, we saw how to migrate, and I think that sums up the demo pretty well. Let's maybe look at the questions, Deepika, if we have any. Um,
Yes, there is one question, Rashi, that I'm happy to pick up. Is there any, if there's any mistake or error during the migration, if there's an internet problem, what happens? So,
mhm.
Nadeem, thank you for the question. As we spoke about, we have all the progress monitors and health checks baked in. So, if there is an internet connectivity issue during the actual migration or replication process, you can see that the replication process or the data copy process will turn or give you a warning, and it'll give you a signal of what could be the problem. Again, you can use those checks and notifications to take appropriate action so that your data copy happens in a smooth way.
Perfect.
Yes, I think there are a few more questions, Rashi, but let's go ahead and talk about some of the other tools and maybe come back and pick up the rest of the questions.
Yes, let's do that. And I think some of the questions might get answered with the subsequent slides as
Absolutely,
well.
yes.
Cool, awesome. So we talked about the server migration tool that helps you perform your rehost in a lift and shift way. We have some other tools that we talked about during assessments that are centered around workload specific migration. Starting with the Azure Database Migration Service, it's a tool that helps you simplify, guide, and automate your database migration to Azure. You can easily migrate your data, schema, and objects from multiple sources and bring them to Azure with near zero downtime. Deepika, this tool supports not just SQL Server, but we've seen customers use it for MySQL, Postgres, a lot of other databases as well. And a lot of folks do use this via Azure Migrate as well today, other than it being an independent service. Another one, which we did talk about, was the Azure App Service Migration Assistant. This tool, again, we talked about it a little bit in the App Service Assessment. With this, you can bring your web applications to Azure App Services. This also helps you do assessment and migration, but you can also again use these tool to via with Azure Migrate, and you have different versions available for different kind of applications, not just your .NET web apps to say. Let's move on to the next tool. I know, Deepika, you want to really talk about this one.
Yes, of course. Moving on to this next tool, which is called the Smart tool. Rashi, I think before we speak about it, let's just take a second to acknowledge it's a very cool, catchy name. This is something I'm
Yes,
definitely going to remember.
it is for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So, folks, the Smart tool is different from the tools that we've seen before. It's not a workload specific assessment tool. Rather, Smart tool helps you take your first step in understanding your readiness to migrate. And it's not just technical readiness, but your overall readiness for migration. The tool will give you heat maps and other reports that you can leverage to understand what are some of your areas of strength when you think about your migration planning, or what are some areas where you need more support or you need some investments in as you go about this journey. Moving on to the last, but definitely not the least, our cloud economics guidance. Moving to the cloud is an important business decision as it is a technical one. So, to support our customers, Microsoft has released the Cloud Economics Guidance and Offering. This guidance was pulled together from the many customer engagements we've been a part of. It's nothing but a collection of technical and financial tips from Azure experts that can help you understand how moving to the cloud can help shape your company's financial posture and meet your KPI goals. So, with that, we come to an end of the different tools on offer. But again, Rashi, like a quick pause and check. Let's do a knowledge check to see how our audience is doing. Again, I know audience scored fabulously during the first knowledge check. So again, audience, this is another sort of a test for you to see how you've been faring here and if there's any confusion or anything that we can clarify in the knowledge check. So let's go look at the first question. Again, our moderators will help post this question in the chat. You can provide your answers either via the chat box or you can put it in the comment section on different platforms that you're part of. So, starting with the first question, Rashi, when you decide to modernize an application, the team needs to select a method for changing the application to make it run in Azure. Which of the following options are used for modernizing? Rashi,
Yeah,
do you want to
yeah, this is
help
a
us
good
out
one,
here?
Deepika. Yes, yes, I definitely want to. There's one comment that I hear from customers quite a lot of times. They're like, if even if we are modernizing, it's kind of a rehost, right? I'm rehosting my applications. Why does modernization not be about rehost? So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that's the answer. I'm just saying what I've heard customers
Yeah.
say as well.
Yeah. And of course, while rehost may not be modernizing the application itself, but you can of course leverage the other modern services for like a modernized tool sets for managing those IaaS deployments after rehost. But when you're thinking about native modernization, there is of course one answer that clearly stands out, Rashi, and I see our audience is getting it right as well. So we'll just go ahead and reveal the answer then. Yes, of
Yeah,
course, it is refactor, re architect, or rebuild as you look to modernize your application on Azure.
perfect. I
Moving on to
think.
the next question.
Mhm.
Oh, Rashi, this is such a common question. I'm very happy that we're covering this today. Can
Mhm.
Linux and open source databases run infrastructure as a service platform or platform as a service solution in Azure?
Yeah, we hear this a lot. I mean, the most common misconception is Azure is not Linux friendly, and I think great forum. I want to see what do folks on the chat and the audience feels about this one before we reveal this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing what folks are coming through, Rashi. But again, you're right about that misconception, and I think the answer is very clear. And I'm seeing the audience putting in the right answers as well. I think folks know it all, Rashi. I don't know why we're doing this knowledge checks. I think folks are answering everything correctly. Of course, the answer is yes. Many Linux open source databases run on Azure IaaS as VMs, and of course, PaaS solutions such as
Yeah,
Azure Database and Azure App Service.
awesome. I think this brings us to the last knowledge check.
Yes. Uh, Another common question, folks, but glad we're covering that here. Can VMware workloads run natively on Azure? Rashi, I know this is a favorite topic for you.
Yeah, definitely. Time and again, folks, especially VMware, who set up these big VMware shops, running all their important mission critical workloads on VMware. Suddenly, when they decide to move to Azure, the biggest worry is what happens to all that tech debt I've collected over the years? What happens to these skills that I've trained, I've spent time and energy and money in training my resources? What happens to them? Are these transferable skills from VMware to Azure? And we did cover this in the demo, so I'm
Yeah,
just hoping the
yeah.
audience gets this right.
Yes, and Rashi, I think the audience knows it all. Audience has got it right again. Of course, VMware workloads can run natively on Azure. You can seamlessly use the Azure VMware solution offering and run the
Mhm.
workloads natively on Azure.
Perfect. I think, yeah, I've
Yes,
been very happy about these knowledge checks, Deepika. We're doing something good here, I feel.
yes. And kudos to the
Of
audience,
course.
Rashi. We just have to
Yes,
call that out.
definitely.
Rashi, I know we cannot end today's session before we talk about some of the awesome programs on offer. So let's
Let's
get
do it.
started with that, Rashi.
Yeah, and talking about AMP, let's start with the Azure Migration and Modernization Program. This is purposefully created to help customers get the right mix of resources as well as expert guidance at every step of their migration journey. And the focus here is to accelerate deployments and build cloud skills and just help customers migrate with confidence alongside of, say, Azure engineers to say. And one of them that we've seen a lot of customers benefit from is the fast track program. I know a lot of folks on audience might just be aware of it. If not, fast track is a customer success program. It helps with direct assistance and architectural advice from Azure engineering directly. You get guidance during your strategy and planning phases and also execution at times for large projects. And though there is a qualifying criteria, we have it on the slide here. Folks can go check it out on the website as well. But if you qualify, you can definitely take help for fast track and kind of accelerate your migrations.
Yeah. And all the programs that we just covered do help in the planning and execution phase. But what about after you've migrated to Azure? So, as you migrate production systems to Azure, operations will become critical, but Microsoft's got you covered there as well. Microsoft has built the Azure Expert Managed Services Provider program to ensure customers have a partner that they can work with for their operational needs. So, you can work with a trusted advisor who can offer you repeatable, highly automated solutions to enable and support your hyperscale cloud implementation. So, with that, we come to an end of all the tools and programs Azure has on offer, and we cannot wait for you all to get started and leverage all the goodness for your cloud migration journey. Well, with that, we do come to an end of all the important topics that we had for today. Everything that was covered is available in your Learn Live modules. So you can use it as a reference if you want to double click or deep dive into any of these topics. Rashi, I know we spoke about so many things today. Can you please summarize it for a kind audience?
Let's do that. So, yes, in this session, in this entire module, you learned about the drivers, phases, and tools that enable successful Azure migrations and modernization. You now have the skills that can help your organizations improve cost efficiency, agility, and scalability by migrating to cloud. And Deepika and I are super confident that with all that we've discussed in the last couple of minutes, an hour and a half, we're confident that you are set up for success and it'll help you accelerate your migration and modernization journey to Azure. So, want to repeat this again. We've covered two learn modules. The QR code is on the screen. We'll also post it in different chats and highlight it. We highly recommend that you complete these after this session. You'll be able to do everything that we discussed in this session and also get the hands on experience to reinforce your learning. And I think that's super, super important.
Yes. With that, folks, we hope you found this session helpful and informative. Here are some resources that you can access to learn more and execute successful migrations. Our teams at Azure are constantly making investments to help you accelerate your migration journey, be it with resources and frameworks such as Cloud Adoption Framework, programmatic offerings such as the Azure Migration and Modernization Program or Fast Track for Azure, and free tools such as Azure Migrate. Again, this was the last episode on our Post Ignite series, but you can always go and visit our Post Ignite module medley page and watch all the other sessions on demand. With that, Rashi, let's open it up and see if there are any questions that we can pick up. I know we're almost on time, but let's see if we can pick up a couple before we call this a close.
Definitely. And let's look at one of the questions I can really see over here that says, I want to migrate my on prem SQL Server Do Azure Synapse into dedicated SQL pools? Am I able to use Azure Migrate? What assessment type can I use for this particular requirement? We recommend right now that the targets that you can plan your migration with Azure Migrate is Azure Virtual Machines or Azure SQL MI or DB. We're working very hard in expanding these targets and giving you uh, more opportunity and tools to do other targets as well. What we would do recommend is do go ahead, create Azure VM assessment and Azure SQL assessments and see if that meets your requirement. That gives you some of an idea, and you can definitely reach out to a lot of us through different forums, and we can help as well. Awesome. Should we look if there are any other questions? Let me give a quick look. I know um, Vikram has been answering the questions on the chat. Thanks a lot, Vikram. Um, Anything particular you see? Okay, I don't think we see anything particular, but yes, really urge our users to go ahead, use these learn modules, kind of get a sense of what we just talked about. If you have questions, do reach out to us on different forums. And I think, Deepika, it's time we can maybe wrap up.
Yeah,
What do you think?
yeah. Of course, of course. Like Rashi said, the Learn Live modules are available for you, and you can always reach out to us if we can help out in any way. With that, we cannot wait for you all to leverage these awesome resources we just spoke about and get started with your migration journey. Thank you so much, folks, for joining us today. We had a lot of fun doing this, and we'll see you soon at the next event. Happy migrating.
Definitely. We hope you had a great time today and we could add to your learning. Happy migrating and thank you.
Thank you.